All right, session number 2. I've made it to the second half hour. Ken, thanks for joining us. I know it's about 9:30 there in Carmel.
Yep.
And actually, I just saw you last week after not having seen you for almost 2 years in person at AWE. It was really good. And we did our book launch, and I'll plug that a little bit later. But I'm going to let you get to it. I know you got a lot of material to get through, and but thanks for joining. And for the first time, I'm gonna have the other half of the Ehrhart family, but late, I guess maybe about 20 hours from now. But we'll see how that goes.
We appreciate it, Bob. Yeah, it's been a great 5 years or so that I think
next
I've
year
been
your
part
children
of it 4
will be
years.
presenting.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Why not?
Okay, off to you. Go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. As I said, I've been working with Bob on VR Day for about 4 years, usually hosting from Tokyo in VR. It's really great start with Aaron there to hear about what he's doing. I'm going to take it up to the 50,000 foot level from there and look at the broader picture from my perspective running a AR and VR company. Really looking at how this goes beyond even AR and VR to a broader transition from 2D to 3D. As a venture capitalist since the year 2000 and in technology research for about 5 years before that, I have 25 years of experience looking at trends and directions in technology. Everyone who does that type of thing is familiar with the Gartner curve of the hype cycle for technology and how you're supposed to go into these hype cycles, reach the peak of inflated expectations and plunge back down and somehow muddle through that. And we've seen that in spades in AR and VR. As this chart shows from August of this year, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are right at the top of the peak of the hype. This, for people looking back at this later, gives some of the details of what's supposedly in these cycles as you move through them. But suffice it to say, if you look at augmented and virtual reality, they've been moving along these curves, going up in hype and back down to reality and then coming up again. And that's really what I'm going to talk about. But this is a nice chart from Ryan Duffy I found on Twitter showing the Metaverse hype cycle. He has a beginning here with Snow Crash and then Neuromancer, even though those are a little reversed in chronological order, up through Epic Games and Fortnite, VR coming down in price, Roblox and others. And this is actually on prior to the change of Facebook to Meta, but there's hype in the world, and I'm going to talk about it specifically with regard to AR and VR, specifically VR. If you look at the last 5 years, 6 years from before the launch of the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift in the beginning of 2016, we've really gone through multiple hype cycles. So first, VR was going to be the next big thing. It was everything. It was the future of technology. The hype was through the roof. The headsets launched. They didn't necessarily do as well as people expected, and we started crashing back to earth. But then we had ARKit and ARCore launch, and everyone knew AR was going to be even bigger than VR because everyone could do it from their phone. Magic Leap rode the wave to billions of funding. And then in VR, it started to come back, first with a location-based VR. You know, hey, maybe headsets are a little too hard in the house, but we can get people into them in shopping malls, other places. And then we saw the second wave of VR hype around enterprise and training and XR training. And by the end of 2019, the market was messaging that we're moving from pilots to deployment in enterprise training. Lo and behold, we ran into the pandemic, and most of that training was going to be in training centers at enterprises, and those training centers closed and shut down. So we went through a wave of virtual events and virtual meetings. Same time we were hitting supply chain disruption where you couldn't get headsets. And so we had another wave when the Quest 2 came out. And then, of course, NFTs and the Metaverse. And this hype cycle is not something I'm making up by living and breathing this. If you look at Google searches around VR, the wave with VR, the wave with XR as AR and VR merged, the wave with the Quest 2, NFTs, and then the Metaverse, you see these spikes of interest, these spikes of attention of web searches, not just news reports. If you look at augmented reality, there's really an amazing bifurcation, because if you searches for AR are at the top, above where we are even for VR. Searches for augmented reality are virtually none in comparison. And so you really have people understanding, catching, using the buzzwords or the abbreviations without necessarily diving into the technology all that much. But this is really a reflection of those waves and a reflection of the industry's understanding of where we're going. If you look to the far left here, this purple line from August 2016, this is IDC's forecast for worldwide spend on VR and AR, just a hockey stick straight up and to the right. This was the future. 6 months later, as you move through, every 6 months, we move to the right 6 months. And the curve either stays steep to match that future forecast, or it bends down a little bit. And we've been doing this year after year for 4 years straight, where you start to question the forecast a little bit as you do this. And then we have November 2020. So this is 1 month after the launch of Quest 2, when we've had a full 8 months or so of the pandemic, but also 8 months of no Quest availability, supply chain disruption. People were looking for alternatives, but they didn't have them. It will be very interesting to see, hopefully sometime this month, when IDC releases forecasts for going forward on this same category, if that red curve straightens back up, as they have even Facebook announcing they're going to spend $10 billion a year on R&D in this area. There's just tremendous interest and money pouring into the sector. If you go back a year at Bob's conference for the International VR for Healthcare Association, this was one of my last in-person conferences on March 3rd, 2020. I gave a presentation on coronavirus and VR, really pointing out that people are working from home, people are going to school from home. If this isn't the chance for VR to prove itself, then VR's not in big trouble, but the organic growth of the market will be a long time coming. And, I want to take a minute here to reflect on that, because we've really had a horrible year and a half, 2 years, over 5 million deaths globally, 759,000 here in the US. And, just to remind people, these are all individuals, these are all people, these are aunts, uncles, fathers, mothers, grandparents, children who have passed away because of this terrible pandemic. This was an art installation on the Washington Mall with one flag for each COVID death in the US. This is when it was about 600,000. And unfortunately, the scale of this is really mind-boggling. And, my heart reaches out to all those that have been affected by this, because it's really a global tragedy. And it's had impacts. It's had impacts on business. It's had impacts on all of our lives. And if you look at the impact on office space for corporations, this is tracking ID card use of people actually going in and out of their offices, and the frequency that they go in and out of their offices from 100% before the pandemic, dropping down to sub 25%, as sub 10% in some locations. And now, even now in October of this year, we're still less than 25% in San Francisco, only 50% in Austin and Houston. So we're at a situation where the commercial real estate market has changed dramatically. Employers are postponing month by month when they bring people back to the office. And employees are saying, we're not going back to the office until, we like working from home. We want alternatives. And we're seeing this in how people are living and moving as well, with a movement from the cities to the suburbs, from expensive cities to lower cost cities, people chasing quality of life rather than just, where they're working and where they have to be in the office. And so far, this is driven primarily by Zoom rather than VR, but the change is happening swiftly. And if you look at this statistic that I found today, it just blew me away. Of business travelers who took 3 or more trips in a typical year before the pandemic, these were frequent flyer, milers, those guys and gals out there doing it for their company, meeting clients, going to trade shows. 40% of those, 39% of those business travelers never expect to return to business travel. It's just not, hey, we'll get back in 12 months or maybe half as much. 40% saying they won't return to business travel. Another 14% saying it will be at least a year. So 53% of business travelers saying they're not going to continue doing business travel. And this is a reflection of what people found during the pandemic. Last week, I was at AWE conference, Augmented World Expo, here in Santa Clara because it's nearby to me. It was the first conference I'd been to since our healthcare conference. In the same 2 days I was at that conference, one of my business partners attended a virtual event. He networked with more people, made more solid leads, and achieved higher results in 2 hours of a virtual conference than I did in 2 days of a real conference. And so a lot of things will change in terms of how people do business. Paracosma, as I said, is my company. We founded it in 2016 at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of consumer AR and VR. We are focused on augmented and virtual reality solutions provider, meaning we do custom AR and VR development. We also do 3D content creation. We have ourselves a US company, Japan company, and Nepal company with locations in San Francisco, Tokyo, and Kathmandu. And so for us, the end of business travel was quite important. It was significant to our business. I used to fly over 250,000 miles a year visiting these places. I have a home in Tokyo, gathering dust. So the first thing we did was to build our own virtual offices for Paracosma, our own virtual auditorium for company town hall meetings. We relabeled and branded these for about over a half dozen other companies to use as well, really moving ourselves into the virtual world, saying to ourselves, if Paracosma as a virtual company, a VR company, can't make use of virtual campuses, virtual meeting spaces, then no company will be able to do it. We've successfully done that transition. We also have helped others, such as the Tokushima Movie Festival, where we ran 3 days with 3 venues of streaming movies, seminars, and esports for the movie festival last year. Worked a lot with different events, including the International VR for Healthcare Association for receptions and after parties. Really seeing what can be done in VR in virtual spaces. And I'd say it's a tremendous amount. Our own team has grown phenomenally for from the start in 2016, we reached about 69 people at the end of 2019, and we held that flat throughout 2020, where we both resisted hiring unless it was replacement hiring, but also we did not let any employees go during the pandemic. We made a commitment that we would maintain full employment, and we managed that quite well, in part because of favorable business opportunities for us. But this year in 2021, we've been growing significantly again. We're over 100 employees, most of those in the art department, but also expanding our development team significantly as well. We've received a number of awards and recognition over the years, including top 5 AR/VR solution providers this year, most trusted, most innovative, and so on. We also are members of all the leading associations in AR and VR, including founding members of International VR for Healthcare Association, VR/AR Association, AR for Enterprise, and so on. Microsoft partners for the HoloLens, as well as Oculus ISV partners. As I said, we do both AR and VR and other things 3D. This is an example of a leading enterprise client we've had since 2018, doing a management training event in both AR and VR, both in 2018, 2019, with 2 events again in 2020 and 2021. Really interesting to understand how we can compare and use AR and VR with the same or similar content. It's really been instructive as to what the opportunities are for this content. In addition to CGI content we'll talk about, we also do 360 photos and videos for travel, for entertainment, for relaxation. We do have a full production team for that. Also, we make hardware and software solutions for a professional broadcast of VR 180, 8K production. We have several systems running in Japan for that technology, as well as a 360 distribution platform. We make VR games. We've published our own VR games with over 16 rooms, everything from giant trampolines to a maze that reconfigures every time you go into it, archery in an Old West stockade. We made this game to learn every type of interaction we could make in VR. You can pick up the books and any small objects. All the plates and glasses break when you throw them. You can turn on and off the TVs, 3D painting, graffiti painting, any type of interaction we might need for games or for enterprise training we developed and worked on in VR. We've made now for AARP over 70 brain training casual games, assessment games, as well as a dozen board games. We're working with them for their Alcove VR application, where you can find our games embedded. Really a great product that they've put out and had great success with during the pandemic. Also VR for trade shows, VR surgery. So we lost our screen. There we go. VR surgery simulation for laparoscopic surgery. I'll run through this quickly. Industrial training, also robotics for manufacturing, training scenarios in these cases. Assessment for taxi drivers in Japan. This will come up later in my presentation as we talk about simulated cities and driving and in game engines for, in this case, taxi driver assessment, but for other uses as well. AR, everything from consumer branding experiences to AR for machine maintenance for manufacturing, and AR for food ordering. And this gets us to one of our main specialties is photorealistic 3D modeling, everything from product modeling for animation and commercial videos to 3D models for photography replacement. And we'll get into this in a moment. We've made over 7,000 photorealistic models for our clients. Industrial digital twins as well, both individual and large scale. These 2 photos on the left are a photograph of a winery that's using Internet of Things sensors to display them on a 3D model of the winery, which is the 2 right images. Similarly with bricks and mortar stores, the Amazon store on the left and our virtual Amazon store on the right that you can enter and peruse in VR, seeing all the books in front of you, some university campus buildings, and full photogrammetry. So that's kind of what I wanted to review in terms of our background. It covers the gamut of AR and VR. And as a technologist, as a venture capitalist, as someone looking at this industry, we started as a VR company, but I've really seen that we're undergoing a transition here, a trend that goes well beyond VR or AR to a broader transition from 2D to 3D. And this is similar to what we went through with text to HTML from bricks and mortar to online, from billboards to SEO with Google advertising, from LAN to WAN with SaaS, software as a solution for enterprise, desktop to mobile, individual to social with Facebook, and audio to video with Skype and Netflix and others. We're now in a transition from 2D to 3D. And this is, as I say, it goes beyond any of the hype for AR or VR, and it's independent of the number of headsets sold, independent of the number of people using AR. And I'll talk briefly and quickly about a number of example cases of this, from 3D printing to digital twins and other areas that will fly through here, to show you that this is really a tremendous transition we're going through in computing. 3D printing, additive manufacturing, we're at the point of using metals and other materials that are durable, usable as permanent parts, and constructed in a manner that is not available in any other way. Really a clear advance for manufacturing, allows much more innovation, faster prototyping, and so forth, all due to the understanding and use of 3D technologies. The digital twin market itself used in industrial manufacturing, everything from modeling factories and workflow in factories to individual items and so forth, is scheduled to have the same kind of hockey stick that we'll see in AR and VR. A really interesting example that happened recently with the Beirut bombing. A team put together effectively photogrammetry using social media and other photos and videos of the event. They triangulated all the videos, time-based, looking at this event, so they could recreate the entire progression of the explosion, exactly which building it exploded from, which part of that building it exploded from, even down to tracking what hazardous materials were in that building prior to the explosion. Really a tremendous work available through 3D technologies that wasn't available before. And as I said, photography replacement's a key industry game changer. Instead of shipping product and to a warehouse and setting up a lighting in the studio, bringing in a professional photographer, photographing, photoshopping, and putting these items online, companies like Arsenal by CG Trader are moving to virtual photography with 3D models. Also, 3Kit, Arsenal has done a study that's available on their website saying virtual photography is 6 times cheaper, or 1/6 the price of traditional photography. A 3Kit, which does similar work, says there's a 90% reduction in costs. Wayfair as well is modeling all their scenes on their website with 3D models, replacing traditional photography. In 3D, self-driving cars, it's really dependent on this 3D revolution. We're both using AI to understand the 3D environment of the car, but we're also using game engines to train the cars to learn how to drive better. And this is a key area for us as well. You're training AI with both organic images for things like facial recognition, but we're also creating synthetic images to better train machine learning by supplementing the organic data. We're doing this in 3D game engines for a number of areas, from aviation to oil and gas and others. And if you look at the news, and I'll
Ken,
pick up the pace to end this year.
Need to give you a 2-minute time check.
Yeah, 89% of execs say synthetic data is a key. 60% will be using synthetic data. AI Reverie in this space won a $950 million contract with the military for synthetic images, and they were acquired by Facebook a month ago as well for an undisclosed amount. So that brings us back to Facebook and what we're talking about. Deepfake videos as well for 3D. We're active in virtual movie production. The Mandalorian, other productions. The Lion King was staged and filmed with the virtual cameras inside a game engine. And that's why Unity just bought What Digital for $1.6 billion. So, if you're talking climate change, if you're talking brains, 3D modeling of the human brain, or Facebook connections. It brings us right back to where we were with AR and VR and Facebook. I think for me, my money, the Google Earth VRs, the part of the metaverse, the key place, you can go anywhere on the planet and see it in 3D, see it in straight through. It's really an incredible program. Can't wait for it to be on the Quest 2. And if you look historically, look back to Second Life. Over a dozen years, we've had Second Life as a persistent online world, 3D environment, social environment. It hasn't taken off at the scale that Facebook has. And so it will be interesting to see what Facebook brings to the table, aside from headsets that get their 3 billion users into a VR headset. But it's exciting times, and look forward to the future. And finish just in time.
Okay. That was a tremendous amount of material in a short amount of time. I'm still trying to absorb just the last 10 minutes. So we only have a minute or two. We do have one question. What's the best / inexpensive way for, in your opinion, for volumetric capture?
It depends on the use. The problem with a lot of and what you define by volumetric capture, if you want to capture a human in 3D with things like the Microsoft Capture Studio or 4D views or others, or if you're talking about capturing objects like furniture. So photogrammetry is very easy and cheap for people to get into and start using it if they want to capture an object. The problem is they're massively heavy models in terms of polygon count and not the type of resolution you usually require. So I have a whole nother presentation on photogrammetry and 3D modeling. Most of our modeling is done by hand, manually, by artists. So they're looking at reference photos, they're looking at dimensions, and they're recreating things with amazing skill and detail. That's transitioning to more automated tools, 3D libraries and material libraries and so on. But it's really, a lot of it is still artists creating things that require an artist to create.
I guess just to close with what do you see happening for Paracosma in 2022, 2023? I mean, is it growing into more art modeling, or are you getting just as much custom dev work opportunities?
Yeah, what most of our clients today are requesting us to stand up teams, outsource teams. And so we're putting together Unity developers, artists, teams, what have you, to be the growth engine for other companies that are really the face of the industry. They're receiving large VC funding and backing. They need to grow their business. They don't have devs available to them. And so we provide the resources they need to meet their investor expectations.
So what year do you predict you'll get a accommodation from Nepal?
Well, there's 30 million people in Nepal.
You got a lot to put to work still.
As California or Tokyo, and we give them opportunities. So hopefully our employees appreciate that, and we're able to continue to grow. It has been hard through the pandemic, but hopefully we're seeing some of the end of that in terms of getting back to work in a more normal way.
Ken, thank you. Thanks for joining me tonight, and have a good evening. And we'll see. You got to come back online to watch your brother present.
Absolutely, and thank you, Bob. This is a tremendous amount of work that you're volunteering for the industry, to benefit the industry for a half dozen years here, and you can't be thanked enough.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. Have a good evening. We will be back very shortly.
Yep.